sweet is the melody, so hard to come by. It's so hard to make every note band just right. You lay down the hours and leave not one trace, but a tune for the dancing is there in its place. Oh, sweet is the melody, so hard to come by. It's so hard.
Okay, Cupid. A supernatural alternate universe fic by Orange Crushed. Read by Asia. He's already watched the commercial like 6 times before he gets what it's about. It keeps coming on during the breaks in between episodes of the Sunday afternoon MASH marathon. Smiling people swinging each other in their arms, looking at each other across tables in coffee shops, curling up together in sock feet on a couch in a perfectly pristine apartment with a lot of light and some ferns. At first he thinks it's an advertisement for, like, that lube that gets warm on its own. But he watches these people smile dopey smiles at each other over yogurt parfaits for the 7th time, and it finally hits him. It's a dating commercial. The logo is a laptop with a heart around it. It's an online dating commercial. "You should do that," Sam says, from his chair across the room. He's looking up from his own laptop with a weird smile on his face, nodding at the television. Dean looks at him and then at the screen. There's another bland-looking couple clutching each other on a roller coaster, screaming in delight. "Pass," Dean says. "I hate those things." The last time he was on a roller coaster, he'd eaten 4 churros and a corn dog beforehand and ended up chucking his contents behind a bush. Cass had calmly called it a miscalculation. Actually, that memory is not as shitty as it sounds. Cedar Point was expensive and 85 degrees in the shade, but it was a good day. Dean spent 10 minutes of the afternoon barfing hot dog pieces into a shrub, and Cass still let him have pizza for dinner. There are friends, and then there's Cass. He zones out for a second until Sam clears his throat. "I'm not," Sam says and puts a hand to his forehead. Pained, like Dean, is a form of fast-acting sinus congestion. "I'm not talking about the roller coaster." "The dating thing?" Dean frowns. "Online dating is for weirdos. Robots. Dudes hanging out in their basement." "You hang out in your basement?" "I have an air hockey table down there," Dean says, icily. Sam puts his hands up and goes back to whatever he was doing before, probably taking a practice test again. But after a few moments, he sighs heavily. Dean ignores him. Sam sighs a second time, and when Dean glares over at him, he's shaking his shaggy head slowly, judgmentally, mutely implying that Dean is so unreasonable. "Sounds like you're losing cabin pressure," Dean says. "Spit it out." Sam scowls, but shuts his laptop and faces Dean directly. Okay, maybe he's actually serious and not just taking the piss out of Dean for kicks. "What?" "I wasn't trying to be a jerk," Sam says. "I just think, it could be good for you." "You think I have trouble meeting people," Dean says. He crosses his arms. "I don't." Yeah. "Meeting people," Sam says, sort of disdainfully, clinically, like meeting people is a condition he's diagnosing. "But it's been a while since you, connected with somebody, right?" Dean smirks and Sam stops. "Don't look at me like that. I don't mean connected. You are so gross." "Digital connections," Dean says, grinning, wiggling his fingers. "Kinky." "Give me a break," says Sam. He gets up and clomps out of the room, and Dean thinks that's that. Dean goes back to watching Hawkeye and finishing the last inch of his beer, and just when his eyes are starting to slip shut, Sam drops the laptop onto Dean's delicate and socially important groin area. He totally ignores Dean's protests in favor of standing over him and pointing his finger into Dean's face. "It's easy," Sam says. "It's normal, and you could meet somebody that you actually have things in common with, someone you want to talk to." "I talked to Cass," Dean blurts out. Sam stares at him. Dean doesn't know why that sentence came out of his mouth or what the fuck it was supposed to mean. The Cass thing is not something he talks about. Not ever. Not like that. It's kind of a rule. It keeps things simple. I have friends, Dean says awkwardly. Sam is giving him the strangest, saddest look now, like Dean is a lost duckling that's about to get scooped up in Sam's gigantic hands and put gently into the bathtub. It's not a big deal, he says. I'll meet somebody, or I won't. It's none of your business. For crying out, it's none of your business, Dean says. He shoves the computer at Sam and stands up and grabs his empty bottle off the coffee table. You think I can't... You get a girlfriend and suddenly I'm the sad one? Fine. Fuck you. Dean stomps away into the kitchen and throws his bottle into the recycling bin harder than he should have. He thinks about getting another one out of the fridge, but he doesn't. Instead, he goes out the back door and sits on the porch alone for a long time, watching the grass move across the field between their neighbors' houses, watching bugs drag themselves across the worn old wood of the deck and then flit upwards on tiny wings, blowing out of his sight like dandelion seeds. For no reason, he thinks about Cass again, standing barefoot out in the yard, telling Dean not to be such a dick about dandelions, that people make salads and wine out of dandelions, that weed is an arbitrary label, and does Dean want to be an enforcer for the pesticide industry or somebody who recognizes the true value of things? For a quiet guy, Cass can talk a lot of shit when he gets going. Dean thinks about flowers and Cass's feet in the grass, and after a while he's not so mad anymore. Sam's not wrong. It's been a long time since he's seriously thought about anybody, but yeah, no, stop, do not pass go. He's not going to screw that up. He'd be better off meeting an internet serial killer than jumping for that ledge and missing it. When he goes back inside, Sam is still sitting in front of the television, angrily watching a documentary on the whaling industry and pretending Dean doesn't exist. Dean sits next to him on the couch. Okay, Dean says. Sam turns his head slowly around. Okay, what? Okay, Dean says, and gestures at the laptop still resting on the coffee table. I could try it. Dean, Sam says. His face softens a little. Forget it. I'm sorry I made you feel... Jesus, I don't want to write an essay about it, Dean cuts in. Hand me the damn thing and show me what to do. So glad we had this talk, Sam sighs. But he hands it over and opens up a browser for Dean, shows him how to register a username and upload a photo. Picking out a photo actually takes a long time, because there aren't a lot of pictures of Dean without other people stuck into the frame. There's pictures of him and Sam side by side in front of the Grand Canyon, at Sam's undergrad commencement, and in front of the grill at Bobby's old house, and more pictures of Dean with Charlie tucked under his chin or Benny slapping him on the shoulder, pictures of Dean with his face painted for the tourney at Moondor, him drunk off his ass at Ellen's with Joe throwing popcorn into his open mouth. A couple of nice old pictures of him with their parents that Sam scanned for Facebook. There are bad pictures where he has red eyes like he's possessed by the Tim Curry devil from Legend. And a million shots of him and Cass. Him and Cass at Ellen's summer barbecues, looking sweaty and buzzed. Him and Cass and Sam working on Bobby's barn after the tornado passed through 3 years ago, wearing dorky tool belts. Him and Cass both purple-faced from a charity pie-eating contest at Cass's school. Dozens of pictures with his arms slung over Cass's shoulder, Cass and Sam leaning over Dean, their faces close to the camera. It takes Dean a long time to find a picture that's just him by himself. One picture of him in the driver's seat of the Impala, with his sunglasses on, laughing. Cass took it on the way to Ohio last summer. Dean picks that one, and Sam gives him a funny look for a minute, but he doesn't say anything. Okay, Dean says. What am I looking for? Huh. He selects both of the little boxes for seeking women and seeking men. No point limiting my options. The page loads for a second, and suddenly there's a long spread of questions, each with their own little text box for him to write in. Dean scrolls down and then tilts the screen to show Sam. This is longer than the fucking GED, he says. It's a sophisticated algorithm, Sam says with a straight face. Dean wonders if he practiced. Dean grumbles, but sits there and reads them one by one. What do you do for fun? He decides against writing, drink beer in my underwear and watch Spike TV, in favor of the much more diplomatic, watch movies. He puts something in there about restoring classic cars, which makes him think about road trips, which makes him think about all the diners he's eaten in, which makes him think about Cass trying every strawberry milkshake in the state, and deciding that the one at Patty's last stop was best. Try new things, Dean writes. It's true. He puts in something else about spending time with friends, and then moves along. What are you most proud of? Dean doesn't even have to think about that. He's sitting next to it, the 8-foot monster with the fancy degree, the nice girlfriend, the good life he deserves. Everything Dean's done to get them this far, he'd do again. Twice if he had to. But he doesn't know if he can write that shit with Sam sitting there 2 feet away, so he writes something brief about my family, and skips the next one, what would you change if you could go back in time? There's not really a text box big enough for that clunker of a question. What is your favorite month of the year? It takes him a second, but there's not really a contest there. It has to be July, when the yard is usually closed because of the terrible heat, and Cass is out of school and Sam is back from classes, and they spend practically every day laying around eating popsicles and getting drunk at Bobby's fire pit. Sometimes they load up the car and go camping, and Cass does terrible bird calls and burns the marshmallows they were supposed to use for s'mores, and lets Dean eat all the Hershey bars. And sometimes, if they are all really drunk, Dean will play the guitar, and between the two of them, they'll try to sing all the parts from Judy Blue Eyes and... Oh, Dean thinks. Oh. It's still a formless thought for a second, the first smoke from a green fire. It's so simple and so huge, and for a second Dean can't see it, can't see anything or feel anything except a great wave of something powerful, something that ships must feel when a wave rises. It passes over him, and then everything becomes so fucking clear it's uncanny. Here he is taking some fucked up test for strangers when the correct answer, the A+, the bonus extra credit, lives across fucking town, and Dean's always been too chicken shit to do anything about it. Is he still? Is he really? Is this going to be it? The moment when he decides there's really no chance, or... Dean sits there unnaturally stiff and quiet and stares out across the top of the laptop, not really hearing the TV anymore. He doesn't know how long he does that. Beside him, Sam turns pages in his book. Dean puts the laptop back on the coffee table, really carefully, making sure his hands don't shake. I'm gonna, he says, and nods towards the front door. I gotta get a thing. Sam raises an eyebrow. A thing, Dean says. You know. Okay. Sam goes back to his book, and Dean tries not to run out of the door and down the driveway.
One arm's just an arm till it's wrapped around the shoulder. Loops side by side, they go stepping out together. The note's just a note till you wake from your slumber and dare to discover the new melody.
He maintains a steady pace and starts the car and gets down the road, and he's 5 minutes from Cass's house before he thinks to actually stop and call him, find out if he's even home, or if he's at fucking Home Depot again buying shit for the bees, spending an hour picking out a specific kind of screening that looks like every other fucking piece of screen Dean has ever seen in his life. Dean pulls over and dials, and tries to remember that this is not actually an emergency, even if it feels that way. Cass picks up in the third ring. Dean, he says. Dean can hear the smile on his voice. I was going to call you. I found a place that stocks... Can I come over? Dean interrupts. There's silence for a second. Of course, Cass says. You're home now? Dean says. I'm not interrupting your grading or your dinner or whatever? He feels like he's babbling. He's babbling. Come over, Cass says. I'm making lasagna. Dean feels a swell of that huge emotion washing over him again, and he actually has to press a hand over his chest to keep from letting out the huge gulp of air he just took in. Be there in 5, Dean says. He's there in 3. He has a key to Cass's apartment, but he never needs it because Cass leaves the door unlocked for him. Cass is already waiting in the kitchen in a rumpled-up button-down shirt and a pair of worn-out jeans that Dean remembers pouring barbecue sauce onto once by accident. There's still a faded stain above the knee. Bizarrely, he wants to put his hand over it. Cass opens the fridge and asks if Dean wants a drink, and Dean feels like he's filling up with thoughts and he's going to barf them out like the corn dog. "Can I," he says, and stops and tries to pull himself the fuck together. "Can I say something?" Cass watches him from around the side of the fridge door and shuts it again. "Sure," he says. Dean starts. It's a pretty solid beginning, and he knows where he wants to end up. But suddenly the fucking middle of the speech is gone, and Dean is imitating a goldfish. "You," Cass says in echo, and the corner of his mouth lifts up, and yes, he is totally fucking making fun of Dean right now. That asshole, getting a tiny bit mad, makes Dean's words come flooding back. "Hey, screw you," Dean says cheerfully. "I'm trying to say something here." Cass says and leans back against the fridge. "You're trying." Today I kinda joined. Sam said I should try this online dating thing." Cass's face makes a funny little twitch. "I saw a commercial," Dean says, lamely, and hopes a cartoon anvil will fall on his head and murder him before this conversation gets any worse. It's awful. Dean doesn't know what's happening. Cass is staring at him kind of impassively, the way he stares at people who aren't Dean, people who try to rope him into conversations about sports or reality television. He's standing perfectly still, which means Cass is kind of freaking out, or else he's in that perfectly calm teacher-taking-charge mode, and Dean is going to detention. "A lot of people do it," Cass says finally. "It could be good for you." "That's what Sam said." Dean grips the side of the counter. "I don't want it to be, though. I don't want it to be good for me." "I don't think I understand," Cass says. "I don't want it to be good for me," Dean says. His face feels hot, but his body feels light, like a seed in the wind, totally weightless, free, not at all terrified anymore. Finally. "You're good for me." Cass stares at him, and his eyes are bright, soft, like the glow of fireflies. They used to catch them together when they were still almost kids, and Dean can remember how they looked between his hands, warm and good, miniature stars that chose to stay on Earth and flicker in the tall grass. He knew then what he felt. But just like the fireflies, he always made himself let it go. Stuff dies when you put it into a jar. Dean knows that. But maybe not this. Maybe not ever. "You are absolutely perfect for me," Dean says. "Dean," Cass says, hesitantly. "You just... today?" "No," Dean says. He knows how this must sound, like he just fucking figured it out. Well, he kinda did. Christ, he's a dummy. Not just today, I mean... Yes, today, for once I just thought... But I screw everything up. I make people leave, and you were always... I always said I wasn't going to mess it up with us. I wasn't going to wreck it. So, day one, he says. That's when. Day one. And then, because Cass still hasn't really said anything, Dean's stomach starts to knot itself up. He feels kind of dizzy. "I'm sorry." Cass's eyes narrow a little. "Man, I know you don't... I mean, if you don't..." Dean inhales hard. "I'm sorry. I'm dropping this on you, and you don't need..." He babbles, and then Cass is coming forward to grab him by the front of his shirt and kiss him until he shuts the fuck up. "Oh, Jesus," Dean says when they break apart for a second. Cass's mouth is reddening, and his hands are knotted in Dean's shirt like he's hanging off a cliff. He looks almost as wide-eyed and hysterical as Dean feels. There is nothing happening in Dean's brain. It's white noise and static and the sound of loose change being shaken in coffee cans. "Holy crap," Dean says, and pulls Cass in again by the back of his neck. Dean starts out in charge and then finds himself backed into the fridge while Cass opens his mouth and sucks the curve of Dean's bottom lip, atomically vaporizes Dean's top 10 hits from his sexual history without unbuttoning anyone's shirt. It is not quite how Dean expected or feared this would go. What the fuck? Dean murmurs, cupping Cass's face with one hand so he can kiss up and down the other side of his face, under his eyes, along his cheekbones, while Cass shuts his eyes and sighs like he's falling apart. What the fuck was I waiting for? I don't know, Cass says. I don't know. Why didn't you, Cass says. Fair, Dean says and kisses down Cass's neck. Did you think it wouldn't have changed things, Dean says, between us, even if I didn't? I know, Cass says. He pulls back and smiles at Dean. His cheeks are kind of pink. I like that about you. Oh yeah? Dean preens. What else? Everything, Cass says, and Dean knows that's fucking ridiculous. Nobody could like everything about him. He's a mess. But somehow, the way Cass says it is it's like stuffing wool in the crack under a door. For a second, Dean can't feel the wind creeping in. For a second, he's warm all over. Safe. The oven timer goes off. You gotta, Dean says, but doesn't let go. You ought to get that. Yeah, Cass says, and tilts his face up and kisses Dean again, hauls him closer, and then lets him go. His palms skate over Dean's chest a little, still, hovering to touch. I'm gonna lasagna, he says. Between the two of them, they manage to find Cass's pot holders, dorky pot holders with kitchen herbs printed on them, and get dinner out of the oven and onto a cooling rack. When Cass isn't holding a casserole dish full of boiling tomato lava anymore, Dean takes the pot holders out of his hands and kisses him some more, because why the fuck not? He's been not doing this for years, and it feels like a giant waste. But then, Cass slides his leg between Dean's, and things start to shift. Suddenly Dean is very hard and also very aware of the fact that 15 minutes ago, Destiel did not even concretely know that Dean had been dementedly obsessed with him for the last 15 years. Dean sighs and takes Cass gently by both arms and pries him off, holds him a couple inches away. I want to do this right, Dean says. Cass's eyes go a little feral, and whoa, has he misunderstood because his hands are now wrapping around Dean's belt buckle. Cass, whoa, oh god, shit, fuck, yes. I mean, no, Cass, I think I want to do this right, god damn it. And Cass gets it then, lets go of him and tilts his head curiously. Shouldn't we, get to know each other? Cass says dryly. Jerk off, Dean says, and runs his thumb along Cass's cheek. Cass smiles kind of goofily. I want to make this good for you. Do things the real way. Take you out, make you feel, I don't know, special, right? Dean, Cass says, you make everyone feel special. Do you not realize this about yourself? Okay, Cass says. We can do it right, if you want. He uses air quotes around right like a fucking alien, and Dean's heart throbs in his chest a little, adoringly. Cass points at the lasagna. Here, dinner date. You can pull my chair out for me if you feel like it. Yeah, Dean says. Cool. I should inform you, Cass says, getting plates out of the cupboard. I'm a sure thing. They skip dessert. Dean wakes up later with Cass in his arms, draped across him like a heavy rug, his face stuck into Dean's chest next to the armpit, and his rucked-up hair tickling Dean's nose. Dean holds on to him and watches morning light climb up the window frame. He feels brave, amazingly so, like he could fight a bear or climb into a burning building to save a basket of cats. He ought to play the lottery. He's woken up next to Cass before, in a tent or a cabin, watched his sleeping face from the other side of an air mattress or across a tangle of sleeping bags and blankets, wondering if that was the closest he was ever going to get. If he'd break the happy spell, the easy balance they had, by rolling closer. He could have had this. He could have had this for years instead of hours by now. Cass is right. There's no more fucking time to waste. When Cass's alarm clock goes off, disturbingly early, Dean rolls him onto his back and sucks small wet circles down his neck and chest, smushes their faces together, and kisses Cass behind the ear. on the forehead, everywhere he hasn't yet. Cass groans and holds on, and doesn't even open his eyes until the snooze timer goes off again, and Dean watches him shift immediately from, yes, good, more, to late for work. Cass takes a 5-minute shower, and kisses Dean, and gets dressed, and kisses Dean again, and then runs out the door with wet hair. Dean putters around Cass's apartment and picks his clothes up from various rooms and puts them back on in reverse order. He eats a bowl of Cass's healthy cereal. It's disgusting. And finally, he locks up and drives home. He has time to change clothes and make some eggs and toast before he heads to Bobby's. Sam is sitting at the kitchen table when Dean comes in, cutting a banana into what looks like a bowl of cardboard. It's the same brand of gross, hay-based breakfast chucks as Cass keeps. Those two nerds probably compare grocery lists. He can easily imagine them at the co-op together, arguing over buckwheat contents and free-range corn byproduct. When Dean comes back to Earth, he finds Sam raising his eyebrows at him. "Morning," Dean says, awkwardly, like that's somehow a lie. "A thing?" Sam says. "You had to get a thing." "Yeah." "For 12 hours?" Sam says, and Dean flushes. But then Sam just smiles and shakes his head and goes back to cutting up his fruit. "Wow," says Sam. "Fucking finally." Dean goes cold all over, and then boiling hot. "You knew?" he hisses. "Everyone knew," says Sam. "Everyone?" "When I brought Jess to that picnic in June, she asked me what your husband's name was," says Sam. "Oh," says Dean. He frowns. "Then why did you... the online dating thing?" "I don't know," says Sam. He grins. "Maybe because I'm a dick?" He laughs out loud, and Dean grabs the banana peel away from him and rubs it into his face, and Sam is still laughing hysterically when Dean lets go and stomps upstairs to change out of yesterday's clothes. He takes 10 minutes picking out which grody old ringer t-shirt he's going to wear, because his eyes keep unfocusing, and his hands feel clammy, and his heart is going stupidly fast. He doesn't make a second breakfast after all, because apparently he's already stuffed with butterflies. Instead of doing that, he decides he's going to check his Facebook and see if Charlie put up any more pictures from last weekend. But there's still a tab open with that dating site profile on it. Dean only answered like 5 questions and forgot to put down his age, but he's already got 3 messages. He's going to delete the damn thing in a minute, but he opens them anyway, figuring they'll be good for a laugh. The first one just says, "You like dick, I got dick for you," and Dean deletes that one right off. He's sent better sex by pocket dial. Some people have no sense of pride in their work. The next one is a woman who runs an animal shelter. No thanks. Dean would never want to live in a halfway house for sad, pooping dogs with their shame collars on. The third one is from only 15 minutes ago. "I'd like to get to know you." Grammar is not especially important to Dean, but he can appreciate the effort. The message is from a brand new profile. The picture is a guy's face with dark hair around it, but it's kind of blurry, like it was taken with a shitty old camera phone in a bathroom stall. He's only answered 1 question. Out of curiosity, Dean reads it. "What are you looking for?" the question says, and underneath it, somebody's just written, Dean. Dean's cheeks go bright red. He can feel it. Somebody is fooling around at work, apparently. Somebody who buys terrible cereal and actually loves Dean, actually wants him. He said so last night, over and over. Dean feels nervous and excited, caught with a secret, like a kid passing notes. He feels amazing. There's a little button under the message asking, "Would you like to make a connection?" So Dean presses send. The end.